Welcome to the channel, viewers. Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist. ERIN Patterson, 48, allegedly poisoned 4 of her relatives by serving them death-cap mushrooms during a family lunch. Two hours by car south of Melbourne, Australia, lies the sleepy town of Leongatha, with fewer than 6,000 residents. It's a world away from its bustling metropolitan neighbour. In fact, Leongatha's principal claim to fame is its annual Daffodil Festival, running since 1957, and according to the local horticultural society, renowned as a family and community event full of entertainment and fun. But this week, the world's press descended on Leongatha for reasons other than flora displays. International news crews have rubbed shoulders with local reporters in a media scrum typically reserved for film premieres and general elections. But rather than Cairns or Canberra, the eyes of the world are fixed on an isolated property nestled in a woodland copse in the town. When the Mail visited this week, an eerie quiet had descended across this remote farming community in the heart of Gippsland, Victoria. For it has been rocked by a mystery that even Agatha Christie would be proud of. Three people have now died, with another man in a critical condition after allegedly consuming lethal death-cap mushrooms during a family lunch hosted by 48-year-old ERIN Patterson. The question Victoria Police homicide squads are now desperately trying to answer is not who done it, but rather, did Patterson accidentally kill 3 people she knows and loves? Or is she a heartless murderess who exploited the fatal properties of local fungi to bump off her enemies? To answer that question, we must outline the extraordinary sequence of events that have shaken this community and the chilling facts which, like mycelia, the roots of a fungus, have crept into the nightmares of its inhabitants. Mrs. Patterson lives with her 2 children in an imposing 2-story home finished with smart white slates and adjoined to a large garage. According to a friend, she inherited money from her parents, who died in 2019, and invested in a number of local properties, all purchased without a mortgage. Although separated from her former husband Simon, the 2 maintain a relationship for the sake of their children, who have not been named. At first, therefore, there seemed to be nothing unusual in Mrs. Patterson's inviting Simon's parents, Gail and Don Patterson, both 70, over for a convivial Saturday lunch with their grandchildren. Thus, on July 29, Gail and Don drove round to Patterson's home to see their 2 grandchildren and enjoy a hearty beef Wellington, garnished with mushrooms. They were joined by Gail's sister and her husband, Heather and Ian Wilkinson, 66, and 68, respectively. It appeared to be a social Saturday like any other, and after lunch the 4 elderly guests headed home. But what they couldn't have known is that lethal toxins from what is thought to have been the death cap mushroom, Amanita phalloides, were already coursing through their veins, targeting their liver and kidneys. Later that evening, all 4 guests began to complain of stomach cramps and nausea. Overnight, their conditions deteriorated and they were admitted to hospitals in Legatha and nearby Corumburra, wherein Wilkinson was a respected and much-loved Baptist pastor. Doctors initially believed the patients were suffering from gastroenteritis or possibly a nasty bout of food poisoning. But as the weekend drew to a close, it became clear that the situation was far from serious. Far more serious. Again, it was far more serious. The 4 were transformed to the much larger Austin Hospital in the northeast of Melbourne, and yet, as they grew weaker by the hour, hostess Patterson and her 2 children remained fit and healthy. We know that the children were served a completely different meal, but why Erin Patterson herself didn't eat the beef remains it's not a mystery. That is not a mystery. She knew. She knew. On August 4, Gail and her sister Heather died in hospital. The following day, 1 week after the ill-fated lunch party, and despite the efforts of some Victorians' most experienced doctors, Don Patterson also died. The only surviving guest, Ian Wilkinson, remains in a critical condition, fighting for his life, and even if he does survive, doctors say that he will require an urgent kidney transplant. God. As the story of the family tragedy spread around the world, journalists and film crews descended on Erin Patterson's home. But they weren't alone. Over the first weekend of August, Victoria Police executed a search warrant on the property and seized a number of items. Why, asked locals, were police so quick to call foul play? I think that's obvious. She didn't eat the meal. She knew it was poisonous. On Sunday, August the 6th, as police completed their search, the journalists outside the house heard a loud wailing sound. A local dingo caught in a trap, or the desperate howl of a woman in distress. Shortly afterwards, leading Senior Constable Kendra Jackson of Victoria's Police Homicide Squad released a statement confirming the 3 deaths and announcing that a 48-year-old woman had been interviewed by police. Erin Patterson was now the only suspect in a possible murder inquiry. This was confirmed by Detective Inspector Dean Thomas, though he stressed the investigation remained at an early stage, and it is yet to be determined whether the deaths were or are indeed suspicious. This picture, the fatal lunch, was attended by Patterson's mother-in-law, Gail's sister, and her husband, Heather and Ian Wilkinson, respectively pictured. Heather died and Ian is fighting for his life. By now, Patterson was not only facing a police investigation into her lunch party, but also the whirlwind of gossip and hearsay that was sweeping the small town. Local people soon began to draw their own conclusions about her alleged guilt or innocence. A prominent local businesswoman who has been keeping a file of press cuttings from day one told the Mail this week she speculated that there was something wrong almost as soon as news of the deaths broke. How is it that she invites them in for lunch, they all fall sick, but there's nothing wrong with her? She didn't eat the mushrooms, and why on earth would that be? Did she just stand round while her guests got on with eating? As the news continued to make headlines around the world, Patterson decided it was time to break her silence. On Monday, August the 7th, 9 days after the lunch, she faced the media for the first time. It was clear from the large bags under her eyes and puffy red cheeks that events had taken their toll on her. Dressed in a baggy grey jumper and barely able to meet the eyes of the reporters all around her, Patterson, portly and middle-aged, protested her innocence. My mum passed away 4 years ago, and Gail had never been anything but good and kind to me, she said. Ian and Heather were some of the best people I'd ever met. They never did anything wrong to me. She went on to describe Gail as like the mum I didn't have. That sounds a bit sus. My own children have lost their grandmother, she added. And then, through tears, she concluded, I didn't do anything. I loved them, but she poisoned them. Despite the heartfelt denial, Patterson refused to address where the mushrooms came from, who had picked them, or even precisely what meal she had prepared for her guests. It would be days before a source close to the family revealed the fateful dish was indeed beef Wellington. Nor did Patterson reveal why she and her children had not eaten the same meal as their guests. Well, that's obvious. And yet, even as she spoke, behind her lay a possible clue as to where the mushrooms had come from. For a cluster of bright orange fungi would be seen at the foot of a tree a short distance away. Was a murder weapon hiding in plain sight? Patterson's father-in-law, Don Patterson, tragically died in the ordeal. He's gone. Sure enough, the very day after Patterson made her public statement, police announced forensic testing was underway to look for traces of death cap mushroom on a food dehydrator recovered at a rubbish tip. At the same time, a Facebook post from Erin's former husband, Simon Patterson, resurfaced in which he revealed that a mystery illness had put him in intensive care for 21 days after he collapsed at his home in May last year while suffering from an undiagnosed stomach illness. All sounds suspicious to me. I had 3 emergency operations, mainly on my small intestine, plus an additional planned operation, he wrote. My family were asked to come and say goodbye to me twice, as I was not expected to live. The couple are believed to have separated soon afterwards. Several friends told Daily Mail Australia that he had not at that time suspected the mystery illness to be linked to foul play. The Mail is not suggesting that Erin tried to poison Simon, only that the recent deaths have made him question whether his illness last year may also have been due to inadvertently ingesting toxic mushrooms, which are known to grow in Leongatha. Police are now expected to demand a copy of his medical records. The Facebook post would be only the start of Simon's involvement, for on Wednesday, August 9th, it emerged that the lunch party, 11 days earlier, may have had a highly distinctive purpose. Patterson's mother-in-law, Gail Patterson, also died after falling ill to the lunch. She's gone. Daily Mail Australia reported that the lunch had been a separate bid by Erin Patterson to reconcile with her ex-husband Simon. She was hoping to win over her in-laws while the Wilkinsons were there as mediators. A source close to Simon Patterson told the Mail she, Mrs. Patterson, wanted to get back with Simon and the family didn't want Simon to get back with her. This wasn't just a lunch, it was an intervention with the pastor Ian Wilkinson as mediator. That's why this lunch happened. Last night, this extraordinary story showed no sign of slowing down. Patterson has since lashed out at the reporters camped outside her property, accusing them of making her a prisoner in her own home. I've got tons of friends who want to help me, but I've told them to stay away while all the vultures are here because they don't want to be in the papers either, she said. So I can't get help from my friends who all want to come and help me, but they'd all be subject to the CP. So do I have to move out of my own home? So now she's playing the victim. Events took a still more surreal turn on Thursday at 10 a.m. when Patterson was seen carrying a large suitcase out of the house, telling reporters she was off to meet her lawyers in Melbourne. Farcically, however, her lawyers were, at that moment, also waiting outside her home, trying to contact her because her electronic devices had been confiscated by police. Lethal toxins from what is thought to have been the death cap mushroom targeted the liver and kidneys. While the drama looks set to continue, there is one further detail the local population has picked up on that has fueled speculation. When pressed by police on where the mushrooms come from, Patterson allegedly claimed she brought them locally. But as far as anyone can tell, nobody else who has purchased mushrooms locally has succumbed to the dodgy batch. In the small towns that ring Leongatha, folk remain incredulous as they ask how a close-knit family group could sit down for lunch only for 3 members to end up dying in an agony of suspected mushroom poisoning. Was ERIN Patterson really capable of a triple murder which may yet claim a further life? There are a lot of things we don't know about this business, said a tradesman outside Leongatha's courthouse. We all know it's pointing to the woman, but that could be a false trail. People are so ignorant. Despite the claims against her, the words of ERIN Patterson, spoken outside her home last Monday, continue to echo through the streets of the town. I love them, and I'm devastated they're gone. Local Mayor Nathan Hersley has spoken of the shock, disbelief and grief running through the community. He added that there's risks involved when it comes to foraging for mushrooms in Leongatha. A lot of people would know what they're looking for. Leongatha is looking for answers now. After all, next month's annual Daffodil Festival is just around the corner. ERIN Patterson goes missing. Lawyers can't find her and are forced to camp outside her home to hand her legal advice as police investigate poisoned beef Wellington deaths. It's Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, writing out.